What's up, everybody? This is Matt Carter back with Matt Co. MC Squared Podcast with the Wolfpacker.com. We're here to talk, obviously, about NC State destroying Duke. You can use whatever adjective you want to use, but it was a curb stomping on Wednesday night at PNC Arena. But before we really dive into that too much, just a couple of quick reminders. One, please go support our sponsors, RogueShop.com. They have all your natural cannabis needs. If you're suffering from sleep deprivation, maybe you got some chronic pain or suffer from anxiety. All of those are serious things that some of these natural supplements might be able to help you out. It's a small business, small company, husband and wife team. Husband is a former husband. His name is Richard, former disabled war veteran. So he's a big believer in his own product. Go to their website. They have a chat function where they actually talk to you. And they're also on our message board if you have any questions. So also, please go check out our YouTube page. We'll have the podcast up on there. If you want to watch John Shire talk about the loss last night, first year Duke head coach, his press conference is up there. If you want to watch Kevin Keats celebrate him with his press conference, it's up there as well. We're up to 1.8 thousand subscribers on YouTube. So, the goal was to get 1,000 when it started. So we're trying to see if we can get to 2,000. Last night, but not least, please sign up for the website. Could be some breaking news coming soon from the transfer portal. A couple of big-time targets visiting. They were at the game last night, I'm told. So, and also there was a basketball recruit in 2024 class, in-state kid that was at the game and offered. So it's a deal. You can get about almost 9 months of the Wolfpacker, 8 months of the Wolfpacker for $29.99. So that's like 8 months for the price of 3 right now if you sign up. So, all right, got that all out of the way. Record time, so we can get right into Duke, NC State. I know Matt Coe has watched this game a couple times in addition to being at the arena. So we're going to break down the game. But I wanted to start with just your big picture, Matt. I mean, you were there. You witnessed it. We talked before the game. For those that don't know, Matt Coe travels from Greensboro and gets to games really, really early. So he may have been like the third person in the arena last night. So you took it in from start to finish, but we were talking beforehand about expectations after you and I both knew that Jack Clark was not going to play. That kind of became a secret that got out before the game started. But we were talking about it, and we happen to be courtside when Isaiah Miranda walks out in street clothes and sits on the bench while teammates were getting their first shots up. So you might have expected a blowout, but not what you saw last night. So I just want your big picture thoughts as it's unfolding. What's going through your mind?
Yeah, to speak on the showing up early thing, I credit that to my dad. Growing up, if we had a game at 9 a.m, travel baseball, we were there probably around 6 or 6:30. You got to be prepared. If you're on time, then you're late. So I like to get places real early and take it all in. My first thought is just what an electric atmosphere. And honestly, after the game, I just kept saying to myself, what the hell just happened? I mean, because that's one of those college basketball games that A, makes no sense, but B, makes perfect sense, because we had, and no discredit to Keats or the team, we had business being in this game, let alone blowing them out. I know me and you talked before the game that, Jack Clark wasn't going to be there. And then it comes out, the team tweets out that, the athletic department tweets out that Clark is going to be out indefinitely. And that's going to leave a big hole in the roster and the depth and how Keats manages to keep this thing afloat. I mean, kudos, because, God, that guy just has such bad luck when it comes to injuries. But you're without your top 2 rebounders. Duke is arguably the best rebounding team in the country, or not in the country, in the conference. and you're leading in that margin at the half, and then you tie it up to end the game. That just doesn't make sense. That's where college basketball is just the weirdest sport in all. But I just was speechless at the effort on defense. That's the number one thing that I took from this: the effort on defense, the effort on rebounding, and hey, like we said, best backcourt in the ACC: Jarkel Joyner, Jaquavion Smith, two superstars.
Yeah. I think you hit on 2 points I really wanted to hit on, but before we do that, you mentioned the atmosphere. Quite a few tweets. A lot of people taking pictures of the crowd right before tip-off or right as the starting lineup were being introduced. And to be fair, those pictures painted a picture. It was a late arriving crowd.
Yeah.
I felt that it was not packed to the brim. But I felt that was kind of like a little bit unfair. I think there should have been some follow-up. Okay, the crowd is filled out relatively nicely. 15,000? 4/5 full maybe.
Yeah.
I thought
I would say
it was
like
a great atmosphere.
75% kind of full, maybe 80%.
Yeah. Look, when I got home, I watched the end of the UNC Wake Forest game. I saw a boatload of empty seats in Chapel Hill as well. So I just wanted to get that off my chest. I kind of felt like the pictures of the crowd. Yeah. If you're going to tweet it out at the beginning of the game, follow up midway through the first half and say, well, you know what?
Yeah.
It filled out a little bit more than I thought. But I did think the crowd played a factor. I don't think Duke handled it well at all, which is something we talked about.
No. Yeah. You had mentioned that, first-time head coach coming into PNC. Obviously, like, there is some magic or enigma that is around Duke going to PNC. We are their kryptonite for some reason.
Right.
And
Six
it's
of nine,
been
by the way.
happening. 6 of 9. I mean, that's ridiculous. And I'd argue in every single one of those games, we were probably favored maybe once. And that's being generous. So, like you said, the crowd, I want to make sure that fans understand this, because I feel like a lot of fans want to say, oh, this is maybe a Keats thing. Like, fans are sending a message. I took it more so as you've got a new head coach. So there's not that quote unquote hatred for Duke as there was with Coach K. So that rivalry still needs time to kind of bake. It's in the oven right now, right? The cake needs to bake a little bit. So there's that. And then on top of that, we're in a weird era of college basketball where the average fan could get by 20 years ago, right? The top tier of college basketball in my lifetime was that early 2000s sprint where fans, especially in the triad, were super, super engaged. Now you're going through this transition period of you've got teams with an entire new roster. I mean, LSU completely changed coaches and roster and just like that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, and so there's that disconnect from fans to a team standpoint. And that's just the way college basketball is now. So I definitely agree with what you're saying that, yes, it wasn't a jam-packed arena like we're used to seeing. But like you said, that crowd was into it. And especially when big man DJ Burns got the ball, that was probably the best part of the entire game.
New crowd favorite. I love what Kevin Keats said after the game. Everybody loving on DJ Burns and forgetting that the guards. Yeah. Let's talk about these guards, because they really did do. I thought Burns gave him a spark right when he came in the game, kind of loosened up the offense, because Duke wasn't scoring, but so wasn't NC State. It was scoreless for the first 3:16 of the game. It was 0-0 before NC State broke the ice and then ended up going up 20-2 midway through the first half. There are a lot of things about this game we're going to talk about, but I think number one is just have to acknowledge, feels strange to say this, NC State has an elite backcourt, especially when the shots are falling. Duke has is it an average backcourt? I don't even know. I mean, seeing them in person, I don't even know if that's an average backcourt for the ACC.
They didn't have that heavy punch, that haymaker of a punch. I feel like with this roster, I feel like it's a completely different roster than we're used to. We're used to seeing Duke just chuck up a lot of threes. Now they're more so inside presence. Filipowski had an ugly game. I was interested to see what Derek Whitehead would do with Jack Clark being out, who was going to guard him. And he had a couple of shots here and there in the second half that I mean, by that time, NC State had just, busted the lead wide open. That
Yeah.
it just didn't matter. But I thought that he had some nice moments. But outside of that, nobody really impressed me. I've not been a huge fan of Jeremy Roach going into the season. I feel like he's definitely played better than what he's been advertised, but he's still not that uh,
Not an all
that
ACC guard.
lead. Yeah, that lead veteran guard that can kind of take on that captain role and really showcase, and doesn't have to be a focal point on the offense. But now I feel like he might need to be, because surrounding him really isn't those heavy hitters that we're so used to seeing with this Duke squad.
Yeah. And when you talk about Smith and Joyner, you're talking about two alpha dogs out there. They believe in
Yeah.
themselves. They're very competitive. Shot might not always fall. And we got recency bias. They played unbelievable last night, but let's not forget, against Clemson, neither one of them could buy a bucket. So they're going to have those type of nights, but when they're on, they're elite and they're alpha dogs. And I felt like the Duke players just kind of shrunk from that. Like they imposed their will on Duke, and you just don't see that very often. But it's also a testament to the kind of backcourt that NC State has this year, which is something you've been preaching about, since late November. It became obvious to you this was a high-level backcourt.
Yeah, I started to get that sense early on in the season. I didn't want to just put all my chips into the center of the table, because we were playing a little bit lesser competition. But after that Coppin State game in Reynolds, I just flat out asked them, "Are you guys the best backcourt in the ACC?" And they said, "Yeah." And I think that everybody's kind of catching on now. And what more can be said? I mean, Terquavion Smith just got nominated for the Wooden Award watch list. So, and I'm gonna throw this at you, and maybe we're just kind of caught up in the moment right now, so just take this with a grain of salt. When you think of great NC State players, obviously you think of David Thompson, TJ Warren, right? Those are the two in my mind that come together like right off the bat, right? And you can throw out Rodney Monroe and Corciano, that's fine. But in my opinion, the top two are those two. Without all the accolades, without the awards, because college basketball is a different game now, is Terquavion Smith, does he belong in that category? I mean, because this kid's a really, really special player. I don't think he's there just quite yet, but if he were to get these accolades, I don't see why not. You can't just put him in that conversation.
Yeah, it's a good question. You really want to go back to the older days. It's kind of hard because I think there's some generational aspect of it too. The older fans would point out to some of the older guys in the 50s that were, that built the program of NC State, that were All-Americans, Ronnie Savlik, those kind of guys. And then, of course, you had David Thompson and Tommy Burleson probably in that upper echelon. And then you got some underrated guys like Kenny Carr that doesn't get a lot of love, but he was considered an elite. I believe he was the first player to leave college basketball early to go pro. Yep. Julius Hodge is up there, ACC Player of the Year. But, TJ Warren was ACC Player of the Year. I think if Terquavion becomes ACC Player of the Year, he gets into that grouping with Warren and Hodge and those types of, particularly because we have to understand in today's era, if you have an ACC Player of the Year, he's probably a sophomore, maybe a freshman, and he's leaving early. Right. Or he's some savvy veteran that Hunter Tyson plays for 6 years at Clemson, and now in his 6th year or 5th year, it comes together for him, and he had another double-double. Shout out to Clemson.
Yeah.
Not a big win.
Had another nice game
at Virginia Tech. So, you mentioned, but that's a great question. It's something to monitor as the season goes on.
Definitely.
And
I don't think he's there yet, but he is on the path at least. Yeah. I think that can be agreed upon.
Sure. Yeah. You mentioned the other thing I wanted to talk about. We were telling you, Jack Clark is the best rebounder on the team. The second best rebounder is Dusan Mahorcic, who's been out since December 6th. And you're playing the team that not only leads the ACC in rebounding, but by a significant margin, they led the ACC in rebounding. And somehow, I loved your tweet at halftime when you're like, I got nothing. Somehow, NC State, it was not a bad rebounding team. That's one of the sneaky areas of improvement this year for NC State. They've actually been a pretty solid rebounding team. But to go toe-to-toe with Duke and go 38-38, and on the offensive glass, despite shooting much better than Duke shot, NC State had more offensive rebounds than Duke. So I know you had nothing at halftime, but you've gone home, you watched the game, you woke up this morning, you watched the game. So how?
So honestly, tenacity. I think the grit. I think a guy that deserves his flowers is Greg Gantt. Rewatching that game over and over again, it's not pretty what he does. It's definitely nose to the ground. Let's get to work. This ain't gonna be pretty, but I'm gonna do what I can. And he had himself a hell of a night. He filled up the stat sheet. Let me pull up his numbers really quick because I don't think that people gave him enough credit.
Yeah, 5 rebounds, 3 steals, 4 points.
Two blocks on top of that too. So, yeah, he was a big factor, especially early on. I noticed early on, and I was so surprised at this, and I think all of NC State and Wolfpacker Nation can agree to this. Ted Valentine calling a game, you don't know what you're gonna get, right? And we're all expecting DJ to foul out within 5 minutes of the game, but no, they actually let him play. They actually let him play a physical game. There was a couple of times in that first 5 minutes or so where Greg Gantt's really fighting for boards, and I'm like, man, in any other game, this would be 3, 4, 5, 6 fouls right here. So I was happy to see them let them play. I thought Gantt starting on top of that. That was an interesting one. I know we texted right before tip-off about the lineup. I was a fan of putting DJ at the 6-man spot. It just doesn't look so pretty because you don't have Deuce on, right?
Right.
Greg Gantt being there was the kind of wild card, but he played into his role. He fit what he needed to do. He's a great glue guy that night. Are we going to get this type of play every night? Probably not, honestly. But I will say every single time that he's been on the floor, he's rebounded the ball well, and he's giving you nothing but effort. And if you can give me those two things, then he deserves minutes. Ibi Dewana doesn't look pretty on the stat sheet, but I thought he gave you some good minutes. Really, the only big guy that really didn't do much was Ernest Ross, who unfortunately fouled out. But I just want to give Greg Gantt his flowers. He did a great job last night.
Yeah, Ross fouled out in 5 minutes and 44 seconds. A couple of those were kind of bad luck fouls. I remember one time going up the court on defense, and the Duke player kind of cut in front of him, and he got, he had nothing he could do. He had nowhere to go type of situation. But, I kind of wonder. You might remember this. I'm trying to remember the year. It was the second Sweet 16 run that Mark Gottfried had at NC State. He made the difficult decision towards the end of the season. NC State was not really on the bubble yet. And he ended up going with Malika Boo and Leonard Freeman and BJ Anya, kind of a 3-man post presence, none of whom at that time were offensive players. And Kyle Washington ended up being the guy who kind of got squeezed out of that rotation. But what it did was it freed up Ralston Turner, Trevor Lacey, and Cat Barber to be the scorers on the court. And NC State went on a run. They won at Louisville. They won at UNC. They held UNC to a record low points total in the Dean Dome. End up going to the Sweet 16. And if Cat Barber hadn't gotten food poisoning up in Syracuse, I think they could have ended up in the Final Four. They had a favorable draw. They lost to Louisville in a back-and-forth game in the Sweet 16. And Barber, you clearly could tell he didn't have his legs. He was still recovering from the bout that he had. And
was that the year that Louisville won the whole thing?
Oh, no. They
okay.
I think they might have lost to Michigan State in the Elite Eight, something like that. But it was one of the weird where the one seed had lost, and it was like wide open in the Sweet 16.
Right.
But that's my long-winded saying. Sometimes it helps to have a Greg Gantt on the court,
Mhm.
who all he does is rebound and defend. I thought he defended really well. And he defends well because he does have some athleticism. He does have some length. He's not skinny, you know. And as you said, it's nothing but 110% hustle on his part. He gives you every ounce of what he has out there. And a lot of times that's the key to defense. It's just effort. Just put in the effort to play defense. And I kind of wonder if there might be something to having a guy like Gantt so that you let Jarkel Jr. and DeQuavion Smith cook even more.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. That was my take when Dusan went down is, all right, you got two great guards, lean on them a little bit more. You know, you don't necessarily have to go to them all the time, but, you know, lean on them a little bit more. And like you said, putting Gantt in that starting rotation, it's not necessarily a empty hole at a spot because he does things well. But I agree, like putting him in there will allow the floor to open up a little bit more. It'll allow a little bit more focal point on your guys that you want to be taking the shots. Like I said, I really like DJ coming off the bench, but it's a tough ask when Dusan's not there. It's a catch-22 situation, honestly.
yeah. And Bones, they were able to, if the game had been close, that could have been a dicey situation because second straight game, Bones had his minutes limited with fouls. I thought DeWanna in both games, by the way, stepped up against Clemson
Mm-hmm.
and against Duke. And like you said, 4 points, 5 rebounds, 1 block shot. Yeah, that's not a great day at the office. But he's going up against a rotating doors of 7-footers that Duke was able to throw into there, and that's pretty good against Duke. Let me ask you, so what blow hit worse, the Jack Clark news or the Ted Valentine news? Because we tweeted them out about 15 minutes apart from each other, and it was a pretty humorous reaction on Twitter.
Yeah, no, like I said, Wolfpack ain't for soft people. You lose your best rebounder right before the game, and then you hear the boogeyman that is Ted Valentine is is waiting behind the door. No, it's got to be Jack Clark, man. Refs are gonna blow whistles. Fouls are gonna happen, but losing Jack Clark is big. I'm interested to see how they answer going to Virginia Tech, who has now lost 3 games in a row by 10 points combined. So if I'd have to put my money on it, it's not looking great for NC State right now, especially after such an emotional win. That's going to be a tough one to overcome. Who fits into that wing position? I know that we talked about on a couple of pods before. The wing depth was already thin, and now it's who do you have kind of situation.
You don't have a wing,
if he can
really.
get back. Yeah, exactly. And I spoke with him after the game, and he seems like he's in good spirits. So hopefully he can get back here soon.
Yeah, really. I mean, you've got a bunch of guards and a bunch of forwards. You really don't have a wing at all. I mean,
Yeah.
and
Luckily, Casey Morsell is shooting so extremely well.
And rebounded well last night. 9 rebounds for Morsell.
Led the team.
Yep. And so, interestingly, Kevin Keith was doing something you were kind of arguing about. Well, he said he was. If it wasn't that, if they had not been playing Duke, he would have started L.J. Thomas and gone 4 guards. So we'll see what he chooses to do at Virginia Tech. Do you want to mess with something that worked so well the first time you tried it? Or do you go with your original instinct? What would you do?
Well, I think for when you're I like what he said. When you're playing Duke, you got to be a little bit more physical. But Virginia Tech's going to let that thing fly. If you're going to try to outshoot them, good luck. I think they're due for a big game here, but they've got a nice inside presence. I would probably go with the L.J. Thomas route just because I don't think lightning will strike twice type of situation. Not to say we can't get that type of play from EB and Gantt again, but they played their part so perfectly. It's going to be hard to ask anybody to do that type of play again. So I would go with the L.J. Thomas route, see if it works, and if it doesn't, go ahead and switch it up. But you got to be quick with it. You can't just live and die by the small guard rotation. So Keats is going to have to make some in-game adjustmants if things aren't kicking off right.
Yeah, I remember Virginia Tech they're not a real deep team. They do start Grant Basile, who I believe is a transfer from Wright State, right?
Yes, sir. Yep.
Yeah, they were part of that Wright State team that did upset NC State in PNC Arena. But that ended up being a pretty decent Wright State team by the end of the year and made the NCAA tournament.
Yes, it was.
And then they also play Justin Mutch, who is very much that rugged, versatile, 6'7", energetic, high motor forward, who's not afraid to be physical. So that's kind of where you have to look at that matchup. Do you want a guy like Casey Morcell guarding a Justin Mutch, who's not afraid to get down on the post, or do you take the chance? It's a good question. Virginia Tech has lost 3 in a row. The loss at Boston College is a bad one. No excuses there. They did lose it in overtime. But the last 2 games, they've begun Wake Forest on the road and Clemson at home, and they lost by a combined 5 points, in addition to losing the overtime to BC. So 3-game losing streak in all 3 games they could have easily had won.
Yeah.
So it's an important game. I'm going to ask you this: How do you think NC State responds? Because here's a little tidbit for you. The only other time NC State had a larger margin of victory against an ACC team was 2017. That was ranked, a ranked ACC team, was 2017 against Virginia Tech. Dennis Smith went off for a triple-double, beat him by 27 points. That game doesn't count anymore, so I guess last night technically tied the record for the largest win over a ranked ACC team. You know what happened the next time NC State played? Do you?
What's up?
They went to Chapel Hill.
That game. Yes. The game that doesn't count, right?
It does not count anymore. No, it does not.
Thank God it does not count.
So, how does NC State avoid, for those who do not know, might want to cover your ears, NC State went to Chapel Hill and lost 107-56. That's 51 points for those who can't do the math. So, how does NC State avoid? I don't think they're going to lose by 50 points to Virginia Tech, but how do you avoid a letdown on Saturday?
Man, it's one of those games that it's on a pedestal for Virginia Tech. You're on a 3-game losing streak of very, very close games. Like you said, the BC losses, you just can't have that. So you have this emotional win. I'm a believer that emotional wins do have some type of hangover effect. I don't necessarily know if both Jarkel and Terquavion are going to come out like they did against Duke. I mean, they outscored Duke by themselves in the first half. And right. the trio of Burns, Smith, and Terquavion outscored Duke for the entire game. So do I see that happening again? Probably not. Virginia Tech is a very tough place to play in. Let's see. They went to Clemson on the road. I believe that's their only ACC road game.
Oh, BC? Virginia Tech?
No, NC State.
And Miami.
Clemson was there.
And Miami.
And Miami. That's right. And Miami. Well, looking at the track record, giving up 17-point lead and then playing the way you did against Clemson, as long as they can play into their strengths, don't reverse back to this ISO ball. Like, you did something that worked, now go do it again. I think we can beat Virginia Tech. I do think Virginia Tech is still a good team. They just had a little bit of bad luck. Being shorthanded isn't necessarily a bad thing when you're playing a Virginia Tech team, like you said, that only plays 7 or 8 guys anyways. So both teams are already going to be shorthanded. I believe it's going to be a 3-ball matchup. I think we're going to see a lot of threes. So if we're hitting threes, great. But like you said, DJ Burns has to stay out of foul trouble. Only played in 16 minutes, still had a great game, but definitely could have played more had he not been in foul trouble. I'm interested to see what that starting lineup looks like. If it's what we've been seeing, where DJ Burns is back into the starting lineup, that's going to be something to monitor. Can he sustain himself and get out of foul trouble or stay out of foul trouble? And I hate to kind of dumb it down or water it down, but Jarkel and Smith, I mean, those two guys are going to be our backbone. Keith said it after the game. We're going to be as good as you guys are. And so if they're hitting, NC State's hitting. If one of them is hitting, then cross your fingers.
Yeah, Virginia Tech, to your point, what you said about three-point shooting, I got 5 guys who've made double-digit threes this year. I got 3 guys who have made 27 or more threes this year. That's in 15 games. So that's a pretty healthy. I mean, that's 3 guys that are on pace to have probably 60 made three-pointers this year. And that includes the big guy, Grant Basile. He's made 31 of 76 three-pointers. So that'll be a very interesting matchup. That's a 40.8% three-point percentage. Can DJ Burns guard him away from, because he's going to have to guard him away from the basket? Can he move his feet and avoid foul trouble in that situation? So, and maybe couldn't Burns get Basile in foul trouble? Because that could be a difference maker as well. So, how long those 2 guys can stay on the court will be very interesting. So, last question for you, Matt. You know, I've been looking at it. What do you think this means for you personally? What did it do for NC State? And you start thinking March. Does it feel, to me, it feels a little bit more real. After we talked about this, you probably needed to win 2 of the next 3, or at least 2 quad 1 games here in January when you had them loaded up. Last night wasn't a must-win. I saw some people say they had to win that game. That's not a must-win. I'm not even sure Duke will remain a quad 1 game by the end of the season. I could see a double-digit loss Duke team this year based on what I saw last night. So, but what is it like? I guess, how do you feel? It's never too early to talk March. It's only 2 months away.
Right. Well, okay, so it definitely wasn't a must-win. But it was a win that in a couple of months we're going to look back on. And the great thing about the quadrants is that quality wins doesn't necessarily compute. If you're a quad 1 win, then you're a quad 1 win. It doesn't matter if you beat Kansas a couple months ago or Duke now. Right now it's a quad 1 win, and that's all that matters. I agree with you that I think that could be a fringe quad 2, quad 1 win. But regardless, you defended home court, and he did so in very convincing fashion. You got the easy part out of the way. You got your one good win that you can kind of hang your hat on for now. Now comes the hard part. You're going to Virginia Tech. You're playing Miami. You got Carolina around the corner. We said you got to win 2 of the next 3. All right, you got 1 out of the way. All right, you beat Virginia Tech. At Virginia Tech would be a very, very big win. I don't think necessarily getting swept by Miami is a bad thing. I mean, they look like they're probably the best team in the conference, in my opinion. And so I don't necessarily think it was a must-win, but in terms of something you can kind of hang your hat on, then yes, that aspect, it's a must-win, because right now their best win was Furman. You know, that's not really something to go home and brag about. It's a good win. It's a good win. But nothing to go home and really brag about just yet.
Don't forget Dayton and Butler. And
Dayton and Butler's definitely not bad. Definitely a good resume builder for quad 2 games. Again, I just think you were missing that name brand win, and now you got it. And so, will it carry over to March is the question. We're kind of now having to root for Duke in a weird way. So,
and also, what kind of helped NC State a little bit is Dayton seems to maybe be showing signs of figuring it out, or maybe they're just playing a really easy part of their schedule. I don't know. But they have been climbing up the net ranking. They're now 67th. And if they get to 50, that puts them in quad 1. So those are the things you got to think about right now if you're NC State. Until NC State plays itself off the bubble, one way or the other, you start thinking, Duke, win. Don't lay an egg at Boston College Saturday. Figure out your whole road woes and beat BC. Dayton, start rolling, keep rolling, move it on up. Butler, win the Big East games you're supposed to win and stay in that quad. I mean, I don't think it's realistic to expect Butler to roll in the Big East and get to a quad one, but win the ones you're supposed to win and stay in that quad two. Vanderbilt, win some games, get into quad two. Stuff like that. That's what you're pulling for from here on out. So, but the most important thing I would say is that's fun, right? It wasn't fun last year when you're in January and February. You didn't even have a reason to look up the net rankings.
Right.
Now you do, or at least for a little while, at least for a few more weeks.
Yep.
You do.
Yeah.
Hopefully
Now
longer.
you just got to avoid those ugly losses. I mean, that kind of more so what I take from this game. You drop one to Georgia Tech coming up. I mean, this win doesn't matter. So you gotta avoid those ugly ones.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, and that's where February gets tough because, if you can do your job in January, then it becomes distressful. Don't blow it in February because you're not really in a position to enhance yourself too much, but you could hurt yourself. So, all right, Matt, it's been fun. Saturday, 7:30, RSN affiliates. If you want to watch the Virginia Tech game in Blacksburg, full day of ACC basketball, I think, Saturday.
Big
I
day.
saw somebody tipping off at 11:30 and another one at 1. So a lot of ACC basketball on Saturday. So follow Matt Coe at _Matt Coe on Twitter. We are at the Wolfpacker. Reminder, you can watch this podcast on YouTube, the Wolfpacker YouTube channel, youtube.com/the Wolfpacker. Follow us on Facebook, the Wolfpacker. You can also listen to the podcast wherever you listen to them. Please rate, review, comment, do whatever you have to do. And sign up for the website. Pretty good deal, $29.99 for the next 7-8 months. We've had better deals, so the deals may not keep coming. So this might be your last chance to kind of hop aboard and sign up for one of these good deals. And last but not least, please check out rogueshop.com. They've been great, wonderful supporters of the Wolfpacker Podcast. It can really help you with some of your anxiety or chronic pain or sleep deprivation with their natural, legal cannabis supplements. So please check them out. So for Matt Coe, I'm Matt Carter. It's been MC Squared. See you next time.